Ever wondered what the difference is between classical and operant conditioning? Well, you're not alone. It's a question that piques the curiosity of many. Let's start by understanding what conditioning is. Quite simply, it's a process of learning. And like most things in life, it's not one size fits all. There are, in fact, two primary types of conditioning that we're going to explore: classical and operant. Classical conditioning, think Pavlov's dogs, is all about associations. It's when two stimuli are linked together to produce a new learned response. Operant conditioning, on the other hand, is about rewards and punishments. It's how we learn from the consequences of our actions. But don't worry, we're not just going to throw these concepts at you and leave it at that. We're going to dive deeper into each of these fascinating forms of learning in the upcoming scenes. So stay tuned as we unravel the intriguing world of conditioning. Let's delve into the first type of conditioning, known as classical conditioning. This form of learning was first studied by Ivan Pavlov, a Russian physiologist who observed his dogs salivating at the sight of food. But Pavlov noticed something interesting. The dogs began to salivate even before they saw the food, simply when they heard the footsteps of the person bringing it. Intrigued, Pavlov decided to conduct an experiment. He introduced a neutral stimulus, a bell, which the dogs had no reaction to. Then, he rang the bell each time just before he gave the dogs their food. After a while, Pavlov noticed that the dogs began to salivate just at the sound of the bell, even when there was no food in sight. The food is known as an unconditioned stimulus, causing an unconditioned response, salivation. The bell, initially a neutral stimulus, became a conditioned stimulus, causing a conditioned response, again, salivation. So, that's classical conditioning, but how does it differ from operant conditioning? Let's find out. Now, on to operant conditioning, the second type of conditioning. Invented by the psychologist B.F. Skinner, operant conditioning is all about learning through consequences. Imagine a rat in a Skinner box. This box, a classic tool in operant conditioning, has a lever and a food dispenser. When the rat presses the lever, food comes out. The rat quickly learns to associate pressing the lever with getting food, and so it repeats the action. This is positive reinforcement, strengthening a behavior through a positive consequence. But there's more to operant conditioning. What if, instead of dispensing food, the lever delivers a mild electric shock? The rat will soon learn to avoid pressing the lever. This is negative punishment, weakening a behavior through a negative consequence. Operant conditioning, then, is all about consequences. But how does it differ from classical conditioning? So, we've explored classical and operant conditioning, but what's the difference? Well, let's think about it. In essence, both classical and operant conditioning are learning processes that are used to shape behavior. However, the way they go about this is quite different. Classical conditioning, as we've discussed, is all about association. It involves pairing two stimuli before a behavior occurs. Think of Ivan Pavlov and his salivating dogs. In his famous experiment, Pavlov paired the sound of a bell, a neutral stimulus, with the presentation of food, an unconditioned stimulus. After a while, the dogs began to salivate at the sound of the bell alone, even when food wasn't present. This is a clear example of classical conditioning, creating an association between two stimuli to elicit a natural automatic response. On the other hand, operant conditioning is about connecting a behavior with a consequence. This was the realm of B.F. Skinner and his box. Skinner believed that behavior was driven by outcomes. If a behavior led to a positive outcome, it was likely to be repeated. If it led to a negative outcome, it was less likely to occur again. So, in Skinner's box, when a rat pressed a lever and received a food pellet, it was more likely to press the lever again in the future. The rat learned to associate a specific behavior, pressing the lever with a positive consequence, getting food. So, while classical conditioning is more about creating associations between stimuli to elicit automatic responses, operant conditioning focuses on the consequences of behavior to encourage or discourage that behavior in the future. Both classical and operant conditioning play significant roles in shaping behavior. They're like two sides of the same coin, each offering unique insights into how we learn and adapt to our environment. And there you have it, the fascinating differences between classical and operant conditioning. Remember, both are powerful tools in understanding and influencing behavior.